Hi freelancer, welcome to today's episode of the Freelance Blueprint. I'm your host Lizzie, a freelance UX designer and digital nomad. Today we're joined by Alice. She's a business strategist, podcast host, speaker, owns her own stationery brand, and now she can also put author on her many list of titles. Her first book, the Digital Marketing Handbook, has just launched. So today we're talking about how Alice got her book deal and wrote the book in only 5 days. We're also covering what it's really like to run your own business and the benefits of having your own podcast. Let's dive in. Hi Alice, where are you calling from?
I'm coming from London right now. I was about to give the detail of I'm coming from my old flat that I don't currently live in, but I just have a desk set up in, but that was potentially more detail than you were going for. But coming from London is the quick answer.
Are you in your new house now?
Yes, so we have all of our possessions and a mattress on the floor in the new house. And then the old house is currently just where we work because Wi-Fi, I could go on a whole tangent on this at the moment. Wi-Fi is so hard to move between houses. Our provider was like, yeah, it's going to take a month. We're like, right, okay. So yeah, we are living at one, working at the other. Literally what you can see in my background plus my laptop are my only possessions in this flat. So it feels like I'm coming into a warehouse to work every day. But between two flats at the moment, which is good fun.
Nice. If I wouldn't know anything about you, but I would meet your fiance, how would he describe you to me?
Oh, that's a good question. He sometimes comes to my business events and he came to the book one last week and I'm always a bit nervous of what are you saying to people? Because he definitely gets the most raw, non-curated version of me. I think he would describe me as very all or nothing. I'm quite intense. I'm very focused. I can sometimes use that in a positive way, sometimes in a, I'm sure, less so helpful way for him. But I think he'd be positive. I think he'd just say in general, I'm very determined. Our new flat is a great example of that. Day we got the keys, I was in there with a sledgehammer and wallpaper remover, just what can I get stuck into and what can I do? So yeah, I think that's what he'd say, but who knows? He'd probably be very happy to be given this platform to talk to people.
I'm pretty sure he will say good things, otherwise he wouldn't have put a ring on it. So
Very true. Hopefully there's something good going on.
So you're doing a lot of things. You're just moving. You're mainly a business strategist, but you also, I saw that you have a stationery shop. You have your own podcast called Starting a Conversation. You're hosting retreats and you just launched your first book. So you do a lot of things. And I feel like many freelancers can relate to having so many hats on and doing a ton of different things. How do you manage it all?
Gosh, that is the $1 million question, isn't it? Which, if I'm honest, I don't know that I am the best equipped to answer right now, to be totally candid with you. I had one of those moments this morning, when you're just so stressed and frustrated and overwhelmed that all you can think to do is cry. Had one of those moments, and I'm not a crier, so that's not very normal for me, but I think it's been building. It's been a very, very big few weeks. I think business normally, is full on, right? And I'm really careful not to use the word busy too much. I feel like saying, oh, I'm busy. You ask someone, how are you? And they go, oh, I'm busy. And it's like, well, that's not actually a state of being, is it? And there's something to me about saying I'm busy that makes it feel out of control and overwhelming and too much. And I try and just think about, hey, business is just full on. And how do I navigate those seasons where it's more full on? And that is definitely a season I'm in at the moment. There's probably never been a more kind of chaotic time in my business and in my personal life. It's always hard, I find, when kind of both happen at once. And I guess just the first thing I'll say with me having a little cry this morning is it's not easy. I think one of the worst things we can do is look at other people's output and make assumptions and go, oh my gosh, they're just handling it all brilliantly. No balls are being dropped. They're just easily, gliding through it. And for me, that's just not my experience. When things are full on, it takes so much grit and focus and self-discipline to get through those seasons. And I don't want that to sound too negative. I love when it's full on, sprinting in my business, which is how I look at these seasons where I'm just doing a lot at once, is my favorite thing. I am, as much as I had a cry this morning, I'm equally I couldn't imagine anything else right now. And this is my favorite kind of state to be in, which, if nothing sums up business, the fact that you can cry and also love it at the same time, I think is pretty accurate. I think then for me on an actual practical level, to give you some actually practical answers there. For me, it's the boring, predictable stuff which part of me would have rolled her eyes at. It's the more I look after myself, the more seasons like this are easier to navigate. I have 3 daily habits which are non-negotiable to me that are around what I eat, moving my body, and getting off of my phone. The second one of those 3 things drops, I see it and I feel it immediately. So at the moment, I am just working as hard as I can to keep those 3 habits in my day to day. And really as well, just to remember that I think when seasons are busy, you can't rely on motivation. I know that's not always a popular answer, but like, I won't lie. There's moments where I'm waking up at the moment and I'm like, I'm a little bit tired. I'm tonight going to be hosting my 3rd event of the week. And I won't lie to you. Part of me woke up this morning and thought, could just stay in bed all day today. But then you've got to have those moments where you go, actually, where I want to be is worth the discomfort of what it's going to take to get there. I will stop rambling now because this has been a long answer. If you can't tell, I'm in the chaos right now. So I'm sure I'm probably needing some other people's advice as much as I can share my own.
It's like what you said, it's a season and you're sprinting right now. And it's the whole project. If you already have a goal of where you want to be and you say you're in the discomfort for now because you know it's going to get you there potentially faster. So you're going to squeeze everything in. I'm in a similar situation. I'm doing a lot of things at once. There's a lot of things happening in my private life, a lot of things happening with work. And I go through phases where, why? Like earlier this year, I had my first dry phase. I've been freelancing for 5 years. I've never had a dry phase. And it's like, this is what everyone's talking about. This is, it sucks. It really, really sucks. So I started to reach out to people, and there were like maybe a lead here and there, but nobody was sure on when the project is going to start. Everything is starting now. And then at the same time, I have I'm opening a co-living in Sri Lanka. So there's a lot of lawyer things. Then also I'm going to try and travel with my partner who unfortunately has a weak passport. So all his visa stuff and all the things he needs from me to do for that. And it's just my to-do list never ends. I call it Kilimanjaro. So I know what you mean. I'm also waffling around because it's like, I also don't like to say it's busy because nowadays it's like this badge of achievement. You're a busy person. Good for you. And also like the word business almost has the word busy inside of it. So I don't want to scare people off that when you have your own business, when you start freelancing, that you're always going to be busy. It's not always going to be like this, but there are definitely phases like this. But I also think those happen in a permanent job. But the other thing that you said that I found very interesting is that you have those 3 non-negotiables for yourself. And I feel the same. When I don't exercise, I can't have a day in front of the laptop. I just go crazy. And the phone thing, I have a lot of apps that take me out of Instagram. I had a lot of meditation reminders. So how do you, especially when your job is probably a lot on the phone as well, how do you stay off the phone?
It's so hard, isn't it? Because you can absolutely con yourself into thinking you're working or doing something, needed, but you're not. Like my worst trait is going and looking at things and I'm just looking. I'm not doing anything. So I'll go to my inbox and I'll see, there's emails coming in that people need me to answer. I'll go to WhatsApp. I'll see the same thing. I'll go to Instagram. I'll see comments I should reply to. And I do nothing about them. I'm just spending my time almost just learning all of the things I need to be doing on my phone, but not actually doing those things. So one of the things I really tried to do, and I will say this as I have never mastered this. This is a constant work in progress for me, and I think it always will be. It's when I open my phone, I really try and ask myself, like, what am I opening my phone to do? 9 times out of 10, when I ask that question, my answer is, I'm going on my phone to avoid doing something else. This task is annoying me. I'm bored. I'm tired. I really, really notice in seasons where I'm sprinting, where I'm fatigued, particularly towards the end of those seasons where I'm feeling myself kind of losing a bit of energy, my phone just seems to become this crutch. It's like distracted, tired, don't really want to do the work, goes to the phone. So I just try and add in a bit of a circuit breaker of going like, why am I going to my phone? And actually, if it's not a genuine reason of go and reply to this thing or do this thing, then I'll just try and question, okay, what do I actually need in this moment? It might be that I legitimately do need a break, in which case, let's not spend our break, scrolling TikTok. Let's spend our break like going and getting a coffee or going for a walk or just, stretching my body maybe, or whatever it might be that I need. So I really try and do that. I can say as someone that did a separate work and personal phone for the last year and has just sold that personal phone. That did not work for me. Building boundaries with work and business when it is all done through a phone, I think is really, really difficult. So I've not mastered it. I have a friend that spends an hour a day. She turns her phone off and she just sits on a chair in silence for an hour a day. And she absolutely, like, I think she might be an alien because I just cannot fathom how she does that. But the fact that that's so shocking to me tells me that I've got a problem. Like, I can't think about sitting and just being unstimulated for an hour. So yeah, again, definitely something I experience more than I've solved. It's really hard, isn't it? We run businesses from our phones, and part of that is amazing. You can take your phone anywhere. You can take your business anywhere. That can also be the hardest thing about it, though, because you can take it anywhere and it doesn't need to come everywhere.
The border between work and private life very easily disappears.
Yes.
And also what you said, that you can just sit there without being stimulated. We are so used to, you have to do something, you have to be productive. Oh, if you just watch a TV show, if you don't learn anything, if it's just for entertainment, then you feel guilty, to just enjoy, because in the same time that you're spending watching, I don't know, everyone's watching Bridgerton now, you could have maybe done another lead magnet, or you could have replied to all your DMs. And there is this guilt, there's this, I'm lazy, I should be doing this. When in reality, we deserve a break. We can just have our brains non-stimulated or whatever it is. And it's actually really hard. It sounds crazy, but it is really, really hard. Do you remember the last time you just sat and did nothing?
I tried to do it last night, actually. So it's funny we're talking about this now. I was sat in the garden of our new flat, and we don't have a garden in this current flat.
Oh,
so it's
nice.
all very surreal and exciting being able to still be in your home, but outside. Like, wow, what a concept a garden is. And I was sat out there and I was on my phone looking at videos. And I was like, what if I just laid here? What if there was some pigeons playing in a tree. I was like, what if I just lay here and just watch the pigeons and just take in life? And I did it, and I'd say I probably lasted 5 minutes. That's probably me being optimistic. No more than a few minutes, until I was just a bit like, okay, I'm done. And I think part of why I find that hard is because it's that fear, isn't it, of when I'm left with my thoughts, what am I going to be left with? Don't get me wrong, I'm not left with thoughts that are particularly, terrifying, but it's more just, what's in your brain. Almost in a way, I think being on your phone just numbs it. My therapist talks about it as it's not rest, it's numbing, right? You're not resting when you're consuming content or watching Netflix or whatever. You are just numbing your brain. And, to an extent, that's all right in small measures, but actually never having intentional time to rest, I think, is so dangerous, which is why for me, I exercise every single day. And that is my biggest non-negotiable out of my 3 is that. And it's not because of anything to do with how I look. It's because that is the only time I find that I actually really get rest mentally. I'm a real active rester. So for me, laying on that sofa in my garden was probably never really going to give me rest because I'm just too busy. But things like exercising, cleaning, walking, something crafty, although I'm rubbish at those kind of things, that helps me to be still. The thought of I'm going to try it one day, what my friend does, just sitting with no stimulation for an hour. But actually, sorry, I will end this answer here. Have you ever done those deprivation salt float tank things? You seen those?
No, but it's on my list. Yeah.
I do them about once a month. I'd love to do them more often. That, I'd say, now I think about it, is the best example I have of complete brain dead rest, just nothing in my head. They are so weird. Your brain goes to really weird places, but I love it. So I would really recommend, if anyone's like me and you're like, I can't resist my phone or being stimulated, lay in a tank full of salty water. You're locked in-ish. You can get out if you need to, but you feel locked in. So it's easier to do. I'd really recommend it.
It's actually crazy to think that in our society, we have to actively seek out rest. We can't just lay down we have to actively do something to feel relaxed. And it's crazy to think about how it's so rewarded to you're busy, you're exercising, you're working, and also your way of resting. It seems like there always has to be a productive outcome of it, because lying down isn't productive. We don't see, even though it's probably having a massive positive effect on us, but we don't see the result. Whereas if you ran, you see your kilometers. If you exercise, you feel it as well. There is a result out of it. So maybe it's this whole, the habit stuff where you need that reward and it doesn't feel like you got a reward. Maybe that's why, but I don't know. It's super interesting because I feel the same. And I try, especially when I travel, to sometimes just like, Lizzie, you're just waiting for the bus or you're waiting for the train. Just sit there. Don't look at your phone. Look at the people around you. You're in this country. You're never going to be this young again in this place at this time. And seeing people without whatever technology is going to be there in the future, Imagine you could go back 40 years ago and just look at the street and nobody looks at their phone, People back then didn't know what was going to happen. And they probably never sat down and just sat there for a moment. Whereas for us, who knows what's going to be there in the future? We never sit down. We never look around anymore. We're just like so focused on, I need to do this. I want to reply to this person. Even when I'm on the airplane, when there's no internet, I'm on flight mode and I reply to all my unreplied WhatsApp messages.
Love that.
I always feel like, okay, I can do this in that time. I can do that. I'm never just there. And I try to consciously do that a little bit more. So yeah, have a look at the pigeons tomorrow. Maybe they do something crazy, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
With your house, you have a lot of things happening. I mean, you did mention how you try to numb your brain sometimes, but how do you maintain a work-life balance?
Oh, that's a question. I feel like I've been on a real journey over the 8 years that I've been working for myself around kind of work-life balance. I got it very, very wrong in the early days. For probably about 4 or 5 years,
wow.
I just didn't reconsider any intentionality around when I wasn't working. I don't regret that necessarily. I think to an extent, the early days of a business are intense. They take a lot. And I never want to be that person that 8 years in, very, very fortunate to now have an established business. I can take a bit more of a step back where I need to. I never want to be that person that's at that point and then says, oh yeah, at the beginning, I should have just worked 9 to 5. Should have just taken the time off, should have set the bound. I'm like, obviously there are things I did in those early days that I would change. I had no boundaries around my work. I thought that working all of the time meant my best output, when in reality it often then means, you might be putting in more, but you're not necessarily getting out more quality or quantity. But definitely for those first few years, the business took a lot from me and I loved it. I don't regret that. I was really loving the stretch. I think as well, that's where I often will speak to people about, running a business. And I think I'm probably the worst salesperson for running a business, because I will often say to people, unless you really, 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 really want to do this, actually not even one, unless this is a non-negotiable for you that you have to do this, you probably shouldn't do it. Because what it's going to take from you in the early days is, in my opinion, only capable of from someone that is just obsessed with the work. And in my opinion, unless you are loving what you are building or you're loving the process, you have to love something about it. It's just going to be so hard because you can't self-discipline years of consistency. So I think the early days did take a lot, and I massively burned out after about 1.5 years of business at the start. And when I say burnout, I'm talking 6 months in bed, doing a thing level of burnout. And I learned so much from that. It was so hard, but I've never got to that point again, which I'm so grateful for. I think I really had a shift then in around 2019, started to realize, okay, actually sacrificing myself for this business isn't logical. I need to work out how I'm at my best, because it clicked for me that, if I'm at my best, then my work is at its best, then my clients have the best experience, then, and the knock-on effect of that started to make sense in my head. I think before I'd thought putting myself first is selfish. And for me, everything's always been about the business. And then I realized, no, actually putting myself first helps the business. So there's reason to it. So something that I started to do was looking at just bringing in a few boundaries. So for me, weekend work just doesn't even cross my mind that I would agree to work at the weekends. It just doesn't happen. Evening work, again, I'll do it. I've worked almost every evening this week, but it's a choice rather than a default. One of the biggest things is I take a month off every year. So every August, I'm completely out of my business. no emails, no meetings, no clients, no nothing. I've done that for 4 years now. And it's one of the biggest things I think that helps me, because I'm not someone that is very good at finding work-life balance in the everyday. I find it much easier to like really, really push, have these seasons of sprinting, and then have this whole month where I just take a complete step back and kind of let myself rest. So I think it's been a real journey for me learning like what my version of work-life balance looks like. Many people will look at my workload and they're not afraid to tell me this feedback without prompting, and say, you're burning yourself out, you're doing too much. And I think it's so individual. What you're able and willing to do and sacrifice is so unique. And for me, the season of life I'm in right now, I'm like willing to really give what I can to my business, but I've learned that I need to do that in a boundaried way so I don't burn out. It's a lesson I'm forever learning. I, towards the start of this year, had a moment of going, okay, I need to make some changes again because I'm getting close to burnout here. But yeah, I think it's just finding what works for you, isn't it? Like,
exactly.
There's no blanket approach.
And that's the nice thing about freelancing. You can make it work for you. I've talked to freelancers on this podcast who said, actually, I realized I like the 9 to 5 approach. So I'm not working after 5 o'clock. Yes, I have office hours, but I have the flexibility to work earlier after I have a long break. But for me personally, I realized 9 to 5 actually works. Personally, for me, 9 to 5 doesn't work. And you can never rely on motivation, because if I'm being honest, the only time I'm motivated is like the half hour before the deadline. So if I would have to
you and me the same, girl.
If I would have to wait for the deadline to come, and then I do everything at once, but I don't do it the best. So I tried so many different things. I tried type blocking. I tried Pomodoro and this, that. And now I'm back to paper versions because online just doesn't work for me, And it's just so many things that just overwhelm you. But for me, because I also travel full time, I have these like work-life balance throughout the day. So now at the moment, not so much because I'm back home with my family visiting for now. But when I'm not here, I just go to the beach for sunset. Also, the time difference helps a lot because I can work in the morning and I know nobody's going to message me in Slack saying, oh, can I have a look at this? Or, oh, we have this new brief. I can do my thing in my own time. I'm there for certain calls, and then I have another break, and then I execute in the evening. And people might think I'm crazy, but I really like working from like after dinner, 8 p.m. onwards. That's when I'm just very, very focused and I get things done quickly and I'm not getting disturbed by anyone. And for other people, it's like, why? You're editing your podcast until midnight? It's like, yeah, because once you're in the zone, you're in the zone. And then it's like, oh, I should probably go to bed. But yeah, I think everyone has to find what works for them. I'm really, really sorry to hear that you actually burned out, because a friend of mine also, he told me about his burnout, and it was, he said he couldn't move his legs. He couldn't feel them. He got blind for 3 days because his body was just, stop this. And he didn't know if it's going to stop. And imagine you turn blind and you don't know if it's going to come back. And this was all because of stress. Do you have any tips for people who might be in a situation right now where they are so overwhelmed? Maybe they've not experienced burnout before, but you've been through the whole process. You're going through a very, very stressful time at the moment, both private and work life. What would you tell people in a similar situation right now?
I think the first thing I'd say is, don't expect there to be a kind of quick and obvious and overnight fix. And I don't say that to kind of put a dampener on things, but I feel like it's so easy, isn't it, to hear this external advice that's like, just say no. Just take that project off your list. Just clear your schedule. Just whatever. And like, if you are at the point of burnout where you need to make those drastic decisions, make them. Like, that was me. I was at a level of burnout where I was like, I can't like sustain anything right now. I need to like clear the deck. So I think if you are really, really at that brink, or, whatever your measure is, like, make those big decisions. But if you're not, like, I would say where I'm at the moment, like, it's not at like, we don't need to kind of hit the panic button and like clear my schedule and cancel everything and like make some big changes. But it is that feeling of going, okay, I'm noticing things aren't feeling good here. I think the first thing is to notice what you notice. My biggest learning from my burnout was learning my warning signs, physical things, mental things that for me, when they crop up, just nudge me and go, Alice, we're not good right now. Like for me, it's random things. Like my legs get really achy. Or if I notice like I'm not replying to my family or my friends, or I missed someone's birthday, or I'm starting to get to the point where I'm just like doom scrolling all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like notice those things for you that show you, okay, we're getting close to burnout. And then I'll just speak for what I do for myself because it's different for everyone, but I'll just try and look at where can I cut back. Again, I think it's easy to hear that blanket advice of like, just take everything off your list. Like you need to make money. Like that advice, it irritates me so much because it's like, what do you think I'm going to do? Like just... Who's going to pay my bills if I, great. But, solving burnout isn't going to give me money. So I need to do what I need to do. So what I'll do is look at everything I've got going on right now and just try and really prioritize and go, right, if I've got 10 different things on my list, 10 different projects or to-dos, if I had to only execute 3 of these, which 3 would it be? And then I let those things, I just try and kind of narrow my focus where I can, take a few things off the list, move a few things down the road if they can be moved, and expect that it feels like quite a slow, long process. I think recovering from burnout, if you are still working, which most of the time is what you've got to do, right, is go, okay, I'm not feeling 100%. I can't just take 2 weeks off. For me, at least, is expecting it to take quite a while. Like this was absolutely me at the end of January this year. I'd just come off the back of 4 months. Q4 is mental for me. So is January. I got to the end of Jan and I was like, I am so like, if I keep going, I will burn out again. Like if I'd have kept going by the end of March, I think I would have been in bed and clearing the schedule. So then I had to go, right, how do we try and avoid this? And it took about 2 months. It was the whole of Feb and the whole of March, reducing my workload. But I was still having to work. I was still doing things. Externally, people wouldn't have known there was a lot going on. But I just had to like cut a bit of space where I could. And then slowly but surely I started to feel like, okay, now I'm not drowning. I'm just like at the top of the water level and like just drowning sometimes. And then the next week it would maybe be like, okay, now I feel like I can breathe. It's like, it is slow progress, but I think it's just the simple stuff of looking for when you can cut back. And then looking obviously at the personal habits you can bring in to help yourself. But I will say when I'm close to burnout, the last thing I feel able to do is exercise or eat well or journal or meditate or speak to a therapist. When you have the least energy, the things that are going to give you energy often feel the hardest to do. So I always try and be quite kind to myself or to my clients with, people will love to give you the advice, clear your schedule and go for a run. And it's like, great, I'm drowning and I need to pay my bills. So please let me know how that's going to help me. Thank you very much.
I think what you said with the phone, once you pick it up, you ask yourself first, why am I picking it up? What is the task I'm going to do here now? I wonder now if I should just change my phone background with a question like, what are you doing here or something? Because we are so used to just picking it up. And even if we end up doom scrolling and numbing our brain because we're just overwhelmed, and this is the time where we don't feel overwhelmed. But then in the end, we become more overwhelmed because we realize we just spent so much time on the phone doing nothing. And we still have this to-do list that doesn't go away by itself. Maybe we can just go for a walk instead, even if it's just going in circles around the sofa or whatever it is. Because it's, like you said, these small things that are the first that go out of the window are usually the ones that are going to pick us back up. Did you actually, I wonder, have a lot of entrepreneurs in your family, or did you grow up with that mindset? Or because personally, I was always told, get a proper job, all these kind of things. What was it like for you?
So I didn't know any business owners until I started my own business. And even then, it took me a long time to actually build community and know other people who were, like-minded in that sense. My parents are absolutely brilliant. They both run a church. They have fantastic values. They have taught me to lead with values and kindness in everything that I do. It's been so inspiring to see them do what they do. Also, it's the kind of church where there's stages and microphones. So I attest a lot of my confidence with public speaking to growing up in that church environment. So yes, I didn't grow up with entrepreneurs, but I think the environment that I grew up in taught me, if you're thrown in a pretty big church, you kind of learn pretty quickly how to get on with people, how to speak, how to lead. I'm not any more involved in church, and I don't mean this in an offensive way to anyone that is, but being religious is kind of like learning marketing in a really weird way. Like you are you're marketing a religion, right? You're marketing a message. You're like learning how to preach or to teach. Like I feel like so many of the soft skills that now help me in business, like I learned in that environment. So yeah, not surrounded by entrepreneurs, but definitely surrounded by some really helpful environments and skill sets. My parents, when I told them I wanted to quit school at 16, which is 2 years earlier than it's legal to in the UK, they were, I think, the perfect blend of skeptical but supportive. They said to me all of the reasons why I shouldn't do it, why they thought it was a bad idea. Everyone in my family's gone to university. Both my parents and one of my brothers have 2 degrees. So they're like, they collect degrees like it's Pokemon. They're obsessed, the Benham family, aside from me. So it was very kind of unorthodox, I guess, for me to say I want to leave school early and kind of quit and go and figure out doing something on my own. And I remember, actually, they reminded me of it last week at my book launch event. I said to them, like, oh, I wonder what like past me would say if she saw this happen. And they said, she'd have just come up to us and said, I told you so. Because I remember in that season saying to them, like, I've heard everything you've said. I take all your points on side, and I'm still going to make the decision to quit school. Thank you very much. So they were great. They've always been great. I think any good parent would probably be slightly skeptical of that decision, but ultimately they said, whatever you do, we'll support you. So yeah, I wasn't surrounded by entrepreneurs, but I think I was surrounded by a really great community. And then once I started a business, I think that was when I realized, oh no, I need some people though that run a business. And as I said, it probably took me a year or 2 to find people that did run businesses too. And that was such a game changer for me. I can see such correlation. The second I got in community, so many things started to grow and get easier.
It's such a big difference when you meet someone who has been in a situation that you are now, or who is going through the same thing right now, because sometimes, especially when you don't know anyone who does the same thing, you wonder, is this the right way to do this? Is there an easier way, or am I completely messing this up, or why am I even doing this? And nobody tells you. And it's so helpful to have like a coach or a mentor or just someone from a networking event who does the same thing as you. And it's like, okay, I'm not crazy. There are other people who chose that path and they're also happy with it. But it's funny that even though actually it's very brave that even though your parents, it didn't sound like they wanted you not to do it or like pushed you not to do it, even though that's what they might have wanted, but you still made your own choice on this. Because I remember I was in a situation where I dropped out of school, but like it was a film school, and it wasn't because I didn't want to finish it. It was because we just didn't get anything taught anymore. We were supposed to have 30-hour weeks, but then we had a maximum of 5. And I was like, I'm just wasting my time. I'd rather do something else. But also, I never thought that I would be a person that drops out of anything. And then I got offered an internship, like as a camera woman, which is exactly what I would have loved to do. But it was, they would guarantee a part-time gig, and it was on a freelance basis. And my dad was like, no, it's too risky, because then if they don't extend the contract, it's all on you. And looking back, I wish I would not have listened to his advice. It was still me who made the decision, but I was very strongly influenced, because for me, my dad was like, okay, he's built this family, he's built his house, he's had a career, all of this. He knows how to do it, whereas I have no idea about life. So it sounds like you've been very sure, and like what you said that your fiance would say about you, that you're determined, that you just go for it. So
some would say stubborn. That's a very nice way that you've put it, Lizzie. Thank you.
You're very welcome. But also, it's how we talk about ourselves. You can call it stubborn, or you can call it brave and determined. So
True.
Yeah. So let's talk about your book. How did you get the book deal? What motivated you to write the book? And how is it to see your book physically printed?
It has definitely been a journey. So I first got approached about writing this book pretty much exactly 2 years ago. It was back in June 2022. And I got an email from my publishers saying, hey, we want a book about marketing. We want it to be this kind of like actionable, no fluff, practical style. We've come across you. We think you might be the person to write it. Are you interested? I thought the email was spam, as I do with most emails, that are for the most exciting things. But I replied within minutes in capital letters with a lot of exclamation marks, basically just being like, yes, let's talk. The ironic thing is I'd never thought about writing a book before. At least anytime I had thought about writing a book, it was very much in the lens of like, that would be far, far down the line. maybe something when I feel like I've got my message, or maybe it's something a bit more autobiographical. I was like, there's a book in me, I'm sure, but it never occurred to me that it might come in the coming years. But it was so interesting to me how quickly that email made me go, no, I'm going to write this book. It was when we got on a call and they were explaining, and I don't think it's typical, by the way, that this is how book deals come around. So I'm very, very fortunate. I know many people go through the process of kind of getting an agent and pitching their proposal to people, but almost this was kind of reverse engineered, because my publisher noticed a gap in the market. And they were saying to me, hey, look, all the marketing books out there are a little bit outdated, or what is out there is quite overwhelming. They're very wordy. How do we make something that's practical? And they were just speaking my language there. And the thing that kept coming up in my head on that first call was like, I want to make a book people use, not read. Like, reading books is brilliant, but so many business books are just 50,000 words in black and white, organized into 12 chapters. And I just think like, that's not necessarily the point. Like, to me, a business book shouldn't be read, it should be used. And so my big thing was like, yeah, this is really exciting. How can we build and design and create a book that does that? So yeah, they approached me. I then had to come back to them with a proposal. So I still had to put in a bit of graft, but thankfully they were happy with that proposal and we went ahead with it. And then it was about 2 years to go from that publication day. I feel an expert now on what happens in publishing a book. I was so naive. There are so many lessons that I've learned the hard way over these last 2 years. But I will say, to now see it out in people's hands, being read, being used, as I said, that's the thing I care about. Like, I'm getting lots of lovely tags on, social media of people saying, oh, my book's arrived. And that does make me happy. But the ones that make me happiest is when people show me like the Post-it notes in the book, or the highlights that they're making, or the things they've done with it. Like, yeah, it is very surreal, very humbling, very overwhelming to now have it out in the world. Partly because with a book, you spend 2 years doing work that no one sees, and then it all becomes public at once, which is amazing, but is very overwhelming as well. So yeah.
How do you like schedule your day if you know you have to write a book? Because I guess everyone talks about writer's block, and then also how do you set the structure? Did you have an editor who might have guided you, or what's the process of getting that email to now having a printed book?
Yeah, so I wrote the book in 5 days, which I wouldn't recommend, but I'm not going to lie to you. If I do another book, which I hope to, I'm sure I'd probably do it in a similar way. As you said about yourself, I'm very deadline oriented, and it wasn't intended to be written in such a short space of time. Let's just be totally transparent. It was a week before my deadline, and there was when I say there was nothing written, like, I'm really not exaggerating. Like, I hadn't written a thing. And I think part of that was, probably a bit of like fear and imposter syndrome. Like, I'll just be honest with you, I just don't prioritize the time. I just business is full on already. I didn't really, where in my day was this book going to fit in? I think I expected it would just like slot in, like an hour a day. That's what I had in my head. If I just write an hour a day, it'll slowly come to life. I had these visions of sitting in a coffee shop and like, bringing the book together. And like, that just wasn't it for me. Like, I just didn't have the capacity or the way of working to do it like that. I'm so all or nothing that for me, it actually worked really well to go, right, I've got 5 days. My fiance moved out of our flat. I turned the Wi-Fi off at the router box and I just got my head down. I went into that week, I should say, with a really detailed plan. That is my biggest tip for anyone writing a book, is do not figure it out as you go. Sit down for a few hours and write out, every chapter, bullet points of what's going to be in every chapter, ideas of who you might reference, what topics you might touch on. Because I went into the week with that, and then I was basically writing it was just a case of going, okay, let's write about that bullet point for 4 paragraphs. Okay, let's write about that one now. I think I'm very fortunate that the subject matter marketing is what I've been doing for 8-9 years. So it didn't take a ton of thinking. It just took time. So yeah, I wrote it in 5 days. Definitely expected once I handed it in, at the end of those 5 days, it was done. Biggest learning curve was realizing actually writing it was kind of, I would say like 20%, 80% of the time was then editing, tweaking, checking, levels of attention to detail that I do not have or struggle to have, I should say. So yeah, then it was quite a few months of working with an editor. And that's looking at everything from like, should we use bullet points or numbers for that list, through to like, oh, you need to use commas there, through to like, oh, you've used one word for this topic here, but then you've used another word for it there. Make your mind like the level of things that you edit was so shocking to me. People in publishing, I take my hat off to them. I do not know how they have that level of focus, but
wow,
it was a lot.
Wow, very impressive to write a book in 5 days. And I've seen like some of the posts that you shared from other people who just got the books and the comments about the design and layout. How was it to like lay everything down? And also, is there a Kindle version of it? How do you reflect the design in a Kindle?
Yeah, so it's in audio, digital, kind of Kindle, and then physical as well. And that was a really interesting part of the process, actually working out how a book translates into those different formats, especially audio. You don't realize until you're reading a book out how many words you use that don't make sense if you're reading it out. You know, you'll write things like, when you're reading this, or if you're seeing this, or as I wrote, and then when you're saying it, you have to switch all of those things out and say, if you're hearing this, or as I say this. So that was interesting. And that you know, if you go with a publisher, you get a lot of help with stuff like that. It's not me sitting and doing that. They'll do it, and then you kind of check and give your input. But yeah, the design side was something that I was so passionate about, because as I said, I didn't want a book that was just words and words and words. I find that really overwhelming. And I tend to find, I don't know if this is a bit niche, but I tend to find when a book is just words, my brain just thinks the aim of the game is to read every word as quick as possible. And I'm like, how do I finish the book? I'm just like gamifying like how quickly I can read this book. And actually, I didn't want my book to be like that. I don't really even care if people read it front to back in its entirety. I wanted it to be the kind of book where you're like, I need help with my email marketing. I'm struggling with my metrics. I need help defining my ideal client. And you can just jump to that chapter. So then the design of the chapters was really important. So you could kind of digest things really easily. And my publishers were brilliant. Basically, I wrote all of the words. And then a fantastic designer called Charlie spent, cannot even imagine how many hours figuring out how design would create a platform for the words. And they took it further than I even hoped they would. We've got so many diagrams. There's like sticky notes throughout that are kind of quick tips. There's like summary and action pages. There's photos. There's color. Like, I love when people open it and they go, oh my gosh, it's so like cool inside. Like, I think people probably just expect it to be loads and loads of words. And I'm like, no, we put a lot of work into that design step. So yeah, that was really important to me. And people say, I've had a lot of people who are neurodiverse and ADHD saying that it's really accessible for them because it's laid out in that way. And that just makes me so happy. So yeah, the design was probably the biggest part of the process, partly because I'm one of those people that isn't an expert in design, but I have a lot of opinions. So I was definitely that person that's like, I think it needs to change, but I can't tell you how. So yeah, they were very patient with me. And that was a lot of back and forth getting that right.
And also it's in the name, it's the handbook. It's the digital marketing handbook rather than, oh, this is how like business A to Z, whatever. So it's quite nice that it also sounds like it's, I need to do something around this topic. Let me find it and use the book to do that. So very interesting. I definitely want to get a copy of that. So you're also a podcast host. How did you start? What was it for you that prompted you to let me actually start a podcast? And how has it been?
So I started my podcast about 6 years ago now, which was a long time ago, back when podcasts were definitely not as kind of normal or easy to create, I should say, as well as they are now. It's been so exciting for me to see the way podcasting has kind of grown over these years. And actually now one of the biggest things I do is help people bring their podcast to life, which I just love, because I genuinely think podcasts are one of the most amazing tools in a business, not just for marketing, but for like building your network and having a space where you can kind of share things in a really kind of nuanced, detailed, creative way. For me, my podcast came from a place of loneliness. As I said, when I started my business, I really didn't know any other business owners. And I won't lie, I was finding myself being very isolated. I thought I was the only one struggling with certain things. I desperately wanted to ask people, hey, how did you do that? Or like, is that possible? And I was slowly starting to see these business owners, and all I could think to myself was, I wish 16-year-old me had seen this. Because when I quit school, I didn't know really what I was quitting school for, hence why a lot of people were like, why are you doing that? And I wanted at that time to create something that young people would consume that would help them go, oh, that's possible. And not just that's possible, but here's how you do it. Here's the reality of it. Let's talk about it, all the highs, lows, and everything in between. So interestingly, that was the initial mission of the podcast. And I was like, I'm going to create something for young people to show them how to start a business and what being a business owner is like. It very quickly then evolved into actually more being for business owners or people that were kind of aspiring to be business owners of all ages. But yeah, that's where it came from. The name, starting the conversation, really for me links to like my biggest non-negotiable about every episode, which is that they are honest. I'm just so tired of business chat being shiny and everything being over glorified. Like, I'm all for the shiny. I'll tell people from the rooftops how amazingly my business serves my life and all the achievements I've made. Like, I want to show people what's possible, but also I'm like, I really believe if you share the shiny, you have a duty to share the reality along with that. Here's what it took to get there. Here's what I sacrificed. Here are the challenges. Here are the things that are really hard behind the scenes. So for me, that was and has always been the mission over these last 6 years. It's just, how do I create something that's honest, that's helpful, that's open? And I love my podcast. Without a doubt, would not be here and wouldn't have my book actually without it, because it was the place that my publishers found me. So without the podcast, I wouldn't be an author. So I've got a lot to thank for making that decision.
Super nice. I think it's crazy. Even 6 years ago, I don't even know if podcasts were such a big thing.
No, they weren't. I remember everyone being a bit like, okay, what's that? And I was like, it's like radio, but recorded? People were like, okay.
But you said before that when you were 16, you quit school. You didn't even know what for. So how did you find your journey into marketing?
So I quit school for a job in events management. That makes it sound much more fancy than it is. I ran a Christmas grotto in a garden centre. That was the job I quit school for. The only job I've ever had was managing elves and Father Christmases and reindeers, which was amazing and a real learning curve. So that's the job that I quit school for. I did that for just under a year. And then I met someone at a hotel breakfast so randomly who ran a charity. That person then offered me a freelance job in their events team. I said yes to it. I didn't know what freelance meant, but I quit my job full-time for a 1-day-a-week freelance job. And then it quickly transpired that the events job wasn't available and they wanted me to work in their social media team. So I was a freelance social media manager completely accidentally, and then it all snowballed and grew from there. So yeah, never ever sat down and thought, I'm going to run a business and be a business and marketing strategist. But 8 years of evolution, and somehow it's gone from elfing to here. So who knows how.
Wow. How do you go? Like, what did you actually, you said you've been there 1.5 years. Was there Christmas all the time?
So it was a very big Christmas grotto. I'm talking like, if there's kids listening to this, someone press pause. Like 5 Father Christmases working at once, like thousands of kids through a day. So it took a ton, and we would begin it in November. So it was kind of my whole life from like July to December, and then like January to July, which obviously I only did for a year. I would help out with like their other events and bits and bobs. I used to also sometimes sell barbecues and garden furniture. So that was fun. I'm a really niche expert in those areas. If anyone's thinking of buying a barbecue, I'm happy to give you my expert advice. Been on many training courses around different types of barbecues. So yeah, it was a fun job.
Cool. So you have a lot of useful tips in your book. You share a lot of things online. You share knowledge on your podcast. But if there would be one thing that you could tell anyone, no matter where they are in their freelance journey, if they just started or if they've been a couple of years in, what tip would you give them?
I would say to anyone, and this is a reminder I'm always giving myself and my clients, the quicker you can move from internal to external action, the quicker you are going to learn and see results and grow. What I mean by that is internal action is the stuff behind the scenes, right? The learning, the prepping, the planning, the strategizing, the thinking. External action is anything you're doing that obviously is actually external. So whether that's putting yourself out there, creating content, pitching to things, taking action, that actually interacts with others. Internal action is great. It's needed, but so many people get comfortable there and don't want to leave. those people that just need to buy another course, just need to redo their website for the 8th time. And I'm like, you just don't need to do anything. You need to start taking external action, because the sooner you take external action, it's that action that you really learn from. So obviously as well, that action that actually grows a business. I didn't write a book by thinking about it and planning it. I had to write it. I had to speak to my publishers. I had to launch it. I had to promote it. So what I'm always trying to do is get myself moving to external action as quickly as possible. If I have an idea, the quicker I can start to execute it, the better. And I find that at all stages of business, we struggle with that. People at the beginning, you don't feel ready. You think, I need to, do whatever to be more ready. And it's like, no, actually you just need to get going. And then I think once you're up and running, it can feel quite paralyzing of like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to now mess this up, or the stakes are higher. And it's like, no, the same theory applies. Like, you've got to take the messy action. You can't wait to feel ready. The sooner you take action, the sooner you grow. That's the thing I keep coming back to.
And the thing is, you will never feel ready, because there's always something where you could be more prepared for, or you could have more knowledge on. And this day where you feel ready it's just not going to come. And once you feel ready, if this ever happens, you will realize that you haven't been ready, because life will throw something at you where it's like, I did not prepare for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely that. And you're only holding yourself back by kind of thinking about it in that way. I think as well, a big part of that is remembering everyone you see is experiencing those same things. So I'm always, if anything, probably a little bit over negative sometimes when people ask me how things are going. I'm like, yeah, they're good. Let me tell you all the things that are really hard right now. Because I never want people to look at my output and think, she feels ready, she feels confident, so I'm going to wait till I feel ready and confident and then I can do that. Like, no. Like, this is a mess, but it's intentional mess and it's okay. But like, everyone's behind the scenes is full of fear and overwhelm and uncertainty. And the only difference between people that reach their goals and those that don't is the action and the messiness of that action, I think.
And I love that you also share the downsides of it, because so many people think like, oh, freelancing, and it's amazing. And it is. I would not change it with anything. But like you say, there are sacrifices. There are just things that you have no idea that you are going to be pushed through those situations, and you're going to make it work. You just have to. And yeah.
Completely agree.
There are 3 questions I ask all my guests. And one of them is, would you ever go back to a permanent job?
Seeing as the only permanent job I had was managing elves, I'm going to give that one a no. I honestly don't even really feel like I've ever had a proper job. So I don't know what I'm missing out on. I'm not very interested to find out what I'm missing out on, because I'm not sure it's for me. So easy answer to that one.
Cool. And if you could go back in time to the girl that had a big discussion with her parents about quitting school, if you could go back to her, what would you tell her?
I would tell her to just keep doing what she's doing. Obviously, I wouldn't want her to change a thing, because we got here somehow, so she did something. But if I had to give her a piece of advice, I'd probably tell her, like, ask for help. I think I was so stubborn that I didn't lean on any support. I didn't tell people that I was struggling when I was close to burnout. I didn't really ask for any help. Even when I started to build business community, I was still quite like, that person where everyone asks you how it's going and you're like, yeah, it's good. Everything's good. And behind the scenes, you're like, it's awful. It's really hard. It's rubbish. But I felt like I had to, probably because I'd made such a big deal of doing what everyone told me not to do, then saying, oh, I'm really struggling and this is really hard. I didn't do that. And I wish I had, and people say, like, I don't have any regrets, because it wouldn't have changed. It would then change where I am now. I think if I'd have asked for help, I would only probably be in a better position today because of that. So I think that's what I tell her to do. But I'll be honest with you, Lissy, she would hear that and go, shut up. No, I'm good. I don't need help. What do you mean? Me? Help? I don't need it. I'm good. So yeah, who knows if she'd listen, but that's what I'd say.
I was exactly the same. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this by myself, and I'm going to do everything all at once. And now looking back, it's like, no, just help others and also ask for help. And this will be, first of all, it's going to be so much more fun. You're going to build your network, and it's going to make your life so much easier.
Completely
agree. Final question. If you think of your future 5 years from now, You will have moved into your house by now. Maybe you will have found a way to just sit on the sofa for an hour without stimulation. Maybe you will have had your second book. And you will be married by then, I guess. So if your future self, 5 years from now, would come to you today, what do you think she would tell you?
Oh, that is a great question. I love that idea. It's a concept in a book I read recently called Playing Big, all about like your inner mentor. And your inner mentor usually is just your future self that's living the life that you want. And they are the wisest version of you. I think she'd tell me, it's the things, isn't it, that you know you need to hear, but you just don't want to do. I think she'd tell me like, you really need to sort out your systems and your processes. And probably exactly like I said to my past self, like ask for the help. I'm in a real season at the moment of like, everything is so full on. And I'm not going to lie, I probably can't do this again in terms of like how chaotic everything is. So I'm really trying to learn from this and think about, right, when I've got a bit of downtime after this book, how do I now bring in some things that are going to help keep this business more steady? Because I love how much is going on in my business and I want it to stay where it is. If anything, I want it to grow. So I think she'd probably say like, yes, you do need to simplify and streamline and get help. Do that. Stop ignoring that and stop doing the shiny things instead of that. So yeah, I think that would be her advice. And I think now I've said it out loud in the podcast, so I should probably definitely take that advice.
Yeah. For the listeners who want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
So my main kind of hangout on social media is definitely Instagram. So people can find me there at Alice_Benham. I also love LinkedIn. My podcast is called Starting the Conversation. There's over 250 episodes. I wouldn't recommend you listen to the early ones, but I'd say the last few years have been good. So lots of chats there with amazing business owners and kind of solo episodes with my expertise. And people can buy my book. If you go to my website, alicebenham.co.uk, there's my book linked there. You can buy it in all the formats from all the different places. And like I said, I really hope that people don't just read it, but they use it. So if you buy it, please tell me that you're using it, because that's the thing that means so much.
Thank you so much, Alice. This was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
I'm so excited to see where things are going to go for Alice, and I can't wait to get hold of the Digital Marketing Handbook, especially if it's a book to be used rather than read, because marketing is definitely something I need to get better at. And on that note, let's do a bit of marketing for the Freelance Blueprint together. If you're brave, I would love for you to share your favorite episode or your favorite guest in your Instagram stories. And yeah, I would love for you to tag me as well. It's at Elizabeth Meyer, Elizabeth with an S, not a Z, Mayr. And yeah, I would love to see what episodes you listen to, which one your favorite guest is, or who you might want to see in the podcast. And that's all from me, and I can't wait to have you again next week. Bye!